Hi there, this is Dr. Judith Briles, and welcome back to another. This will be an awesome visual edition of the AuthorU-Your Guide to Book Publishing. And as always, I like to start with a quote. I've used this quote many times, and I think it's totally appropriate to use this. This is from my little book, Snappy, Sassy, Salty Success for Authors Quotes. And it turns out my guest today was one of the cover designer. There you go. That's the first edition. This is the second edition. First edition had 200 quotes. This has 400. So we're back with more. And it literally, sometimes I just randomly open something up and where we go. And so this might work for creativity. Since we're going to talk about creativity, we're going to talk about books, the good, the bad, the ugly, especially when it comes to book covers. So be goofy, be silly, be outrageous. Awesome and creative ideas can be the outcome. I've always said that when you're working with a creative designer, award-winning, someone like my guest, the awesome Nick Zelinger, that it's important to just get out of their way. Don't try to tell them what to do. They're open to ideas, but get out of their way and let them do their thing. That's what I feel strongly about. So as always, we always lead with, we thank our sponsors. Nick Zelinger of NZ Graphics is one of our sponsors. He is multiple award-winning for best-selling books. He's included several of mine that he can put his name on and getting this out there. And I like it because he can create amazing books at affordable prices. And we're talking about design, the interior, the cover, the whole shebang. So Nick, you are on today. We are going to have fun talking about the good, bad, the ugly, how people get into deep doo-doo, how to get them out of it. I'd love to get into when do you throw in the towel and start over? What happens if you've got your book is ugly? And I know, look at everyone, you can go up and um, Google ugly book covers. You will be surprised what you'll get. So where shall we start today?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I do that on a steady basis. I look at ugly covers to make sure that one of my covers, first of all, is not up there, but
Yeah.
but also just to see what trends are. I mean, and your point of letting a designer go their own way for a while and see what if there's any magic that happens, but also uh, not to corral them in too much, but also you, you made a point of kind of getting loosey goosey and creative with stuff because that's where you kind of break the mold. It's very easy to kind of toe the line with any design to fit into the standards of the day. It doesn't mean you have to be a total renegade and do something crazy, but I think uh, a lot of authors miss the opportunity to discover something fantastic. And I've got some cover examples that we can look at today, kind of the trends that
Fun.
have
Yeah.
carried over from the last 2 years into this year. Some that I think work, some that I think are a little bit kind of And then also I'd like to add in the mix to this AI generated covers. There's some real strange and interesting stuff going on with that. And we probably need to hit on that a little bit uh, since it's
Hmm.
you know we're seeing we're seeing that in the marketplace already. So
Hmm. Hmm.
and then
Let's do it.
yeah, let's do that. Let's start with the covers, and then we'll get into the odd shaped books and the coffee table books and the gift books, things that there's authors out there that do that too. But showing them the options that are available in that selection of printing and books.
Would you also get into, if you can kiss on it, because of many of the self and indie authors, and even the big guys, are moving more and more into print-on-demand versions. But there are limitations with cover, lots of cover design, of having widgets onto them and things, and the like. So I'd love to have you get into, if we can, some sizing issues or where you get in trouble, especially with gift books, because gift books can be all sizes.
They really can, and I've got a bunch here on the floor here next to me that vary in sizes from, like I said, your original edition of Salty and Snappy, which is, a little gem, to, some really
Mhm,
large books,
mhm,
your
mhm.
standard coffee books. So some of those things can be done on print on demand, uh, but we all know the limitations of that. I know Amazon and as Ingram have a set kind of list of trim sizes, but you can do custom sizes on those things. But then you fall into the danger of sizing. And then if, say you do a coffee table book that's 11 by 12 inches, which is not the standard size offered by either print on demand. And you do that in case bound, but maybe they don't offer that, or you can't do that in a softbound book. In other words, soft cover book version of that. So you got to really kind of look at what's available, and of course, the limitations of print on demand is uh, you can't do the things that traditional printers do, like spot emboss, spot lacquering and
Mhm.
embossing and die cuts and stuff like that. So we don't have that. You don't have that available to be really creative, especially if you're wanting to do a book that is really different, really out there. I'll show you an example of this here. Betsy got me this the other day.
Ooh, look at that. The dollhouse book. Well, I know how that's going to open when you open it.
Yep,
Exactly.
and it's
Yes.
all color, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful.
So, if you were to
Yep.
do a scaled down version of this, and you were saying doing a book about a haunted house or designing a home, you could die cut it into that. Print on demand obviously does not allow for this. You can't do that. You just have to go to a traditional printer, and I'm sure this was done in Hong Kong and in the printing aspect of it. It was created here in the United States. So, those
Right.
die cutting is a different thing altogether. But you might, if you're an author that wants to do something totally different, there's a children's book, for instance, uh, you could do that, or even some other odd shape, geometrical shape. So it can be done. Um, so I think, but let's get back to the covers, um, because I think we'll see some trends and some things that we've already done in the last couple of years in the terms of using vibrant colors and dominant typefaces. Some of those things are always going to be standard or carry over from year to year, because those are the items that have worked the best approaches. But we've got this interesting approach to minimalism versus maximalism, and we're seeing
Okay.
a lot in um, certain genres. So I can show you that too. You want to share my
All right.
screen?
Yep. You need to do the share.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
All right, so this is these are not new books. They just came out in 2024, but
Okay.
the use of large type, bold type, um, clean backgrounds, uh, inviting colors is still going to um, be around for a long time, I think, especially when you're talking nonfiction books, uh, because they're kind of utilitarian, but they also they're dynamic, and the minimal use of color and approach
Mhm.
still works really well for business books and nonfiction books. So we're
So,
seeing,
Nick, as you look at these books, we have three totally different books where we have, I think Melinda Gates, this is a more of a memoir. Would that be true?
yeah,
Okay. So we have that. And then we have a business book, the on Success by Grant. And then we have a parenting book. So what works for these? What sets them about?
I think for Melinda Gates' book, it's the it's the juxtaposition of the colors. I mean, there's this kind of sky, muted sky blue, and a very hand-drawn kind of font that has a little bit of the background coming through it, kind of sketched font that shows some of the blue into the yellow gold with the white
Mhm.
in contrast. So it's like chalk, like it was
Mm.
possibly quickly done, but the type is large. I mean, with somebody of importance, a celebrity or uh, a best-selling author, their names are going to be almost as large as the title. That's just a kind of a given when they're, this probably was on the New York Times bestseller list before it was actually even out on shelves, probably. Um, but it works really well. Just the three color combination catches your eye. I remember we've always talked to authors about, you know, it's got to be recognizable at a thumbnail size. It's got to be something that catches your eye, even at that tiny size.
Oh, you know what? I'm so glad you brought it down. For all of you authors, when you're getting samples of your book covers from a designer of any sort, do yourself a favor and potential buyers a favor and reduce the size to 25%. And then look at that thumbnail. What's it show on that would show up on like an Amazon page? All of these books will have a pop to it because you can read the title. So important.
It is, and the use of white on the in the second two uh,
Hmm.
images is great. I mean,
Hmm.
people would tend to think, some authors would tend to think, well, there's just not enough going on. Well, we'll get to that a little later about the maximalism efforts, but for the subject matter, these are both really kind of clean and crisp and to the point, and teach a child to love. With the eye being substituted for a silhouette of a child with hearts,
Right. Hmm.
simple, elegant, um,
Hmm.
to the point, centered on a white background with actually the name being maybe a little bit too small, maybe, but not
I think it is too way too small. Way too small, I think.
a. I'm sure that was the author saying, I don't want it that large. But you are selling yourself. So don't be too modest. It doesn't have to be Melinda Gates size, but it could have been the size of like the one to the right, Adam Grant. Uh,
Hmm.
they're balanced.
Hmm.
But I like these three covers. I've always My goal in the last many years has always been kind of like songwriting. It's like a cover should be trying to get it simpler, down to some basic things so that I can see if it really pops. And I think these do a really good job of sending their message without being overkill. So we'll get on to the next slide here.
Okay.
These are part of the trends that we're seeing in some nonfiction books, which is kind of clip arty images. These could be, I mean, a lot of this art could be substituted for something else, but they're crisp, and silhouettes are really big in style, and just sort of like little icons. But uh, these are all three nonfiction books, obviously, but
Hmm.
I think the layout and the presentation and the balance of the titles work really well. I think a book like Fundraising Strategies, fundraising is such a long word, but you can't really break it up. So it's always been, that's a challenge for a title like that, but I think it works well. And then of course the bright colors that we're seeing, those are carried over this year too. Just the bright oranges and blues and contrasting colors. I think that's going to be around for a while just because it pops.
Well, the color of the year is a very boring beigey brown.
It
I
is,
don't know.
yeah,
It's really boring.
yeah, it's like bathroom wall color or something you don't want.
I know. Yeah, it's like, oh,
But you're right, and every year Pantone brings out something that's kind of trendy, and that one was a miss, I think.
mhm, I think. Okay.
So, moving on, here's a mixture of nonfiction and fiction, and we're seeing some illustrative stuff. and a little bit of the, what I want to call, and especially in the second two, is maximalism, where it's real busy, but the titles, both on A Kind of Madness and The Vanishing Point, really pop out against that kind of illustrative quality. We're seeing a lot of illustrating in book covers now. I don't want to say it's taken over what the photographic elements of a cover are, but these kind of drawings and art are really coming back strong. The one on the left is just a different approach to the title, since the title is so long, and the the subtitle is kind of pasted in there in blue along the line. So it catches your eye. This is kind of like a memo, that beige color thing you'd see on a craft paper or something. So I think that works really well too. But
I don't like the trouble in Centerville. I mean, I get what they're doing, but it's um it's the subtitle. I'd rather see the subtitle more together.
the internet stressed out, yeah. The
Yeah, I think so.
the ragged right is a little different.
Yeah.
So I think it's just probably just to surprise the reader, so a different approach. You don't really see that too much, especially with like on its own line, for instance.
Hmm.
So, but the last two, those are great examples of what we're going to see a lot of in fiction, and even in some nonfiction books. And then to the point of you saying, let an artist kind of uh, have their way and be a little bit more creative. These two covers really stand.
Ooh, that makes me laugh. So
Blob, and everything's weird about it. It's some jelly mass, like the Blob, like that old horror
it's
movie.
a blob.
It's the Blob, but the center, A Love Story in Maggie Sue, is off-centered a little bit, and it's kind of bleeding around the edge of the Blob. It's really just two colors.
Okay, so when you're talking about the purpose of a cover is to get people to pick it up. It's that magnet to come through it. I would pick this book up because it would make me curious.
Yeah, it's and it says in the subtitle, it's a book about identity and desire in profoundly different, interesting ways. So that is even intriguing too, just a little blurb there. But yeah, I mean, I think it stands out. I found that on a bunch of different sites that were showing what they thought were the most interesting book covers and successful in terms of the design. Because the fonts, even the font on Blob, it's kind of plopped.
Weird.
Yeah, it looks like it's
Yeah.
designed like jelly mass, but I think that's
Yeah.
if you're thinking of a new, different approach, that's pretty in your face. And and Salman Rushdie's
Hmm.
very clever and simple cover works really well. I mean,
Hmm.
you can see,
Well, if anyone knows anything about his attack on the
uh,
stage, that kind of brings it all together.
yeah, I just think
Do you
that's,
think it would have been more effective or people would get it if they brought a knife and even because it's still if you showed more of an edge of a knife or the flat side of a knife, it would still be the eye in there? Or do you think just the sharp edge has the
my
more
gut
effective?
feeling is I'll bet that whoever designed this when they were doing concepts probably had that dagger as an eye
Hmm.
in there, maybe longer and
Hmm.
taller in there first. And that's my feeling, because I know if I was doing this, I would have certainly done that for consideration.
Yeah,
But
I would, because you don't make me work too hard to figure out. Remember, covers, you just get a few seconds for someone to pick up your book.
3 to 4 seconds, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And then these are another interesting trend on, like I was saying, illustration and large dominant type on good dirt, for instance. So fiction's taking, it's always an opportunity to be a little bit more adventurous,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit out of the box. Even Boris Gander's book, Mojave Ghost, um, they use the same font on everything: the title, the name, and the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. It's minimalistic, and it's got a sand kind of grain texture on the cover to mimic kind of like desert sand or something. So, but it's one of those things where you see it and it's not in your face, but it does catch your attention. And this is what I was talking about, the approach to maximalism. We're seeing this in a lot of fantasy books, sci-fi books,
Yeah.
fiction books, even memoirs. Um, so much stuff going on, and on purpose. It's to make the reader spend
Mm-hmm.
time with the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll hide little messages or icons or images or clues to the book on these covers. But it certainly is, it's certainly what we're seeing. And this also leads to where some of this stuff could be, I would say, AI derived. Maybe the authors started an AI generated cover idea and use it as a starting point for a more detailed design. Uh, I'm thinking the House of Flame and Shadow in the middle one is so detailed and so articulate in terms of um, the detail and the crispness of it. Uh, I'm not sure how an illustrator could have done that because it's something is going on here everywhere and it's extremely visible.
Mm-hmm.
But
So you're saying the Moss title is definitely got AI all over it. Is that what I'm hearing?
thinking that it was probably they might have generated the starting idea and then
Mm-hmm.
gone on to saying, well, we want something like that, and then the artist designer either hired an illustrator to flesh it out uh, because there's this dragon's tail or snake going through it.
Yuck. But
And
but that's fantasy. That is a fantasy.
if you just Google these books in fantasy, that genre, you'll see a multitude of these. But I think all three work. They're all interesting, and part of it is some of the expectations people have on fantasy books. They
Mm-hmm.
want to see that. We saw that with Game of Thrones when it first came out, and some of the later fantasy books. They kind of expect this now. They kind of expect either the warrior woman on a dragon or a knight or something, and that kind of thing. So, but it does lead to the last one, which is AI generated covers.
Mm.
The one on the left, Sarah Moss, as I saw this on the news, it's been a lot of controversy about this because it was an AI generated cover. And so a lot of graphic designers have been up in arms about, uh, you know, this is the beginning of the end if we start doing this. Apparently, there's a couple of issues about this that need to be addressed that I think we have to be aware of. That, like the wolf in the background, is actually a copyrighted image available from either iStock or Getty Images.
Mm-hmm.
You have to purchase that image. So what they use an AI generated engine to do this cover. So what AI does is it scans the internet for any images they uh, decide uh, will work, regardless of if it's copyrighted or not. So they just take it and put it together. So they didn't cite that attribution to that art that was from Getty when they made this cover. So
Wow.
storms about this because
Wow.
this is what will happen with AI generated covers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you'll have to vet where these images are coming from. Had they probably found this image on Getty, they could have purchased the image, first of all, so they owned it for its usage of the cover. But I think we're going to have a lot of discussions about that in the next couple of years. The next two, Infinity Courts and A Cat Named Bastion, are kind of mock-ups that were done by AI generated engines. And it's the same thing. They just go through the internet, find images that are appropriate, and put them in. So we have no idea where those images came from. But they were most likely, the property of either Dreams Time or one of the subscription services that we see online. But we're going to have a lot of discussions about AI generated. People will sometimes use that as a starting point for design, which I can understand is a good idea. What kind of disturbs me is that I'm seeing a lot of people also say they're writing their books that way too.
Well, they are. I have to go back to the moss thing. So since this was somebody's illustration that got lifted by AI, what are the ramifications here? From the publisher, from the author? Publisher has a lot of money. The author has made a boko amount of money.
Yep.
Does the original illustrator get any compensation?
If they actually take some legal action, they probably will. I don't think we've seen anything yet. All I know is I read that there's just a lot of talk about it. Got called out pretty close to after publishing that this was a AI generated cover, and that image was seen by many graphic designers and book designers. So there's been a lot of stuff on social media about it. But I would assume that, Getty or iStock or Shutterstock or whatever, Adobe, whatever subscription house owned that, would be addressing that issue with the publishers. And then the publishers, of course, have got to fix that if it moves forward. So I'm going to pay a little close attention to that and see what happens. But I think we'll see more of that as it goes on, especially if they don't get called out on it. If they don't get confronted with it.
Amazing. Yeah.
Well,
it's a great wolf.
Yeah, it's a great wolf. We like it. And so that's what I got for covers for 2025. Vibrant colors, big fonts, busy artwork that kind of fits into the genre, and also simple, direct covers with clean backgrounds. And then to your point, let the designer take the reins for a little bit and see what comes up with, what they can come up with. See what you can create. So.
Okay. So, Nick, what steps should an author? When should they reach out to someone like you? That's always, I think, a good question. When do you start brainstorming covers? My attitude is early in the game. If before your book is written, as would be my deal. But what kind of steps? Let's go through step by step. What should an author be doing when they're thinking about a cover design? For what homework should they be doing? What should they be carrying to a designer? What kind of questions should they ask the possible designer? What kind of things?
I think if you've been writing a book, whether it's just you just started or you've been toiling with it for 12 years or so, to your point, early in the game is always better, because you never know what kind of pitfalls or roadblocks you're going to find. But I think an author needs to start thinking about the cover right away. Not that they have to decide what they want. And I get a lot of that. This week I've had 3 authors give me explicit instructions about what they wanted on their covers. So I know the kind of discussions we're going to have after that. But I think an author needs to look at their book and decide exactly what their audience is, and then investigate either by going to a bookstore, brick and mortar store, or going on Amazon, going online and looking at covers in that genre. What are the best
Mhm.
selling covers? What are the ones that they like? What they want to look at and say, that's what I'd like my cover to be look like, or that's the feeling that I want, or those are the colors, and make notes of that. Because I'll always ask an author, give me a synopsis, give me a back cover if you have back cover copy. They rarely have back cover copy at this point. Um, so that's another challenge altogether. But I ask them to send me a description of the book, uh, and cover ideas, or cover samples of covers that they like, that they think will fit into the mold of their cover, so that I can see where we're going with this in terms of the complexity, uh, trim size, obviously, get that out of the way, figure what size you want.
Mhm.
And then I would say, if the synopsis doesn't really uh, tackle the image of, the idea of the visual, then I would have a discussion. I'd really always like to have a phone chat or a Zoom call with them, just to show them examples. But if I get that, that's usually the good starting point for an author and an artist to get going, and then we can kind of talk about timelines. If they say, "Well, I'll be done. The book's at the editors. It'll be probably back in a month," or "I'm still writing the last chapter," or whatever. But
Mhm.
always better to be early in it. There's a lot of benefits to that, because if you can get a cover that you really like, then you can start blasting it out on social media about coming soon, and trying to get some traction with your fan base, or
Well, if you're within 3 to 6 months, you could actually put it up as a pre that's coming. If you're really firm on it, if you're firm on it. So, are you able to share, Nick, some of the evolutions of some of the covers that you started with, that you threw away, and where you ended with? What was the ideal one, that this was it? I remember years ago I was in a lecture, and the guy was employed by National Geographic, and he was talking about the evolutions of the photos of the taking, and each one we were going, ooh, ah, amazing, this is it. It wasn't until he finally got, this was it, and then he explained why it was it, and he was right all along, but we would have accepted all the other stuff.
it's true. And that happens a lot. Well, I don't know if I got it here. I have to search for it. The one
Mm-hmm.
cover that you and I have talked about many times is
Mm.
the Raven Mocker, or the
Oh, yes. Yes. The Red Raven Mocker.
let me see if I can find that real fast for him.
Okay. So while he's looking for that, what it was is the author was making a classic mistake. Well, he did multiple things. And I told him, let's do a focus group. Let's show some of these samples that you have, these ideas, to people who were buyers of his book. He forgot about the line buyers of his book. And he kept coming up with, and this is a classic problem that a lot of newbie authors do. And if you look at some of the earlier ones Nick shared, there was a simplicity to those covers. The fantasy ones get a lot more complicated, but a lot of the books that connect have a simplicity to it, and basically one central focal. It's very common for newbie authors to want to put all the elements on, and then your eyeball doesn't know which way to go on it, and it really doesn't need it. So, and this author, who's written many, many books since this book, this was his first book that Nick's going to show you, had did a focus group, and I remember calling Nick, and I said, I'm gonna lose on this until I asked the question, who tell me about the people in your focus group that selected this. They were all the wrong people. His wife, his mom, his best friend, his neighbor. They people who loved him. That's not who you want to have in your opinion circle people who buy your kind of book because they're going to know what's going to pull them in on that. And you may not recognize that. So as soon as I recognized that, I thought, oh my God, I have a fleeting chance of coming back and pitching again the simplicity factor. Okay, Nick, take over.
Okay, so this is the cover we're talking about. First Raven.
Mhm.
Now, I met the author Courtney at a coffee shop, and he really gave me detailed information about what he wanted on the cover. He wanted a raven. He wanted an Indian maiden in a stream because it was part of a scene in the book.
Yeah,
This is what you hear a lot with authors that want to
yes.
see or multiple scenes. So actually, buried behind the type on this was actually one of the front covers. There was an Indian maiden here. There was a raven on a pole and some clouds and stuff. That was one of them. That was per his instructions. That was the original cover. And I just said, Cornelius, wait, it's not this. There's no focus to this. You can't. We had different font for the cover, but I just said, there's no focus on this. You can't have. Usually, scenes don't work on a cover. You want to give somebody a hint of something, intrigue them, titillate them, uh, something that sparks. Oh wow, I don't know what anything this is about. I want to read it, but you just don't put a specific scene.
Nick, I found one of the older proofs of the
Very
back
big.
cover. Okay, so that what he's talking about, see our babe in the stream, and
Yep.
then we had with that, and then there was a skull, and there were some other elements, but he had the everything on the front cover. Everything on the front cover.
So you and I both went back and forth with this a lot.
Hmm.
At some point, he got convinced that um, that approach was not going to work, and that we needed to do something a little bit more uh,
Mm.
compelling. So this front actually is a collage of different elements that sort of worked out
Hmm.
in terms of the colors. There's the silhouette of the raven with a red eye that I added. There's a
Hmm.
skull in the background in a little bit of lighter area, and then
Right up here, yeah, right
olive,
here.
and then some very bare trees, and then another silhouette of a raven's wing on the top. These are all blended so subtle. And when in the print version, it's there, but it's not in your face. So this is much more vibrant on screen.
Yeah.
And then I found a font that I thought was just really different and didn't, I've never seen it before. And it doesn't really work on a lot of occasions, but it worked for the cover. And just putting it all together uh, made something. And then made it makes sense. The back now makes sense.
Hmm.
It's there, but it's still not in your face. And we had actually that is an earlier iteration. There's more. There was a head.
Yeah, this is early, but we caved in saying, okay, well, we can put some of those elements on the back cover, and this has changed. This is as this is an evolution as
Yeah.
we went through that final cover. But that's what's important for all of you to understand that this is an evolution as you go on, and you'll know when it hits. And I remember our friend Dom Testa, when he saw that cover, he held it up to me in the final. He said, "This is the single best book cover I've seen this year." When he saw Courtney's cover with the simplicity of just the raven on it.
Yeah, I think like you're right. It is a collaboration and it's a process. Uh, Rarely, very rarely, you'll hit the bullseye. Any designer might hit the bullseye with one cover that works without question. But more often than not, through the years, I've found that it's just a process. Process, and it's usually a process of elimination uh, that takes effect. And
Mhm.
remembering that where what are you looking at? What's your audience? Uh, you know,
Mhm.
don't give away too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. And it's
Well, it's also going to one of the things that Nick and Rebecca Finkel, the other designer that we work a lot with, is the incorporation of your cover within the interior layout. So there is a pop. I don't know, Nick, if you can pull up anything and show some of the things that can work that you have done on doing that, but it does customize the book and it does set it apart. And I think that we authors make a lot of mistakes when we just get into, oh, we're just going to do line after line after line after line after freaking line of text versus giving the eyeball a rest. Remember, society's evolved and they read differently.
yeah,
The reader of today is dramatically different than the reader of 5 years ago.
yeah. So here's a quick example for even with the
Oh,
Raven.
so that's Courtney's book.
Yeah.
So so he brought in the Raven on the post, and every chapter would open with that with that. Did he have any point of view changes or segues within that book
Um,
that you used an element?
we use the Ravens.
So we had a feather. So when they had a point of view change, then the feather would come up. But those are really little things, and a good designer gets it.
And there's other ways to, and Rebecca does this really well with the opening chapter pages, just creating some sort of background for that,
Mhm.
whether it's a old stone wall that was part of the cover or something like that, a little fake.
Mhm.
So just enough.
Mhm.
But you're right. Um, with today's reader, they just like today's music lover, they want to see a lot of stuff. You know, it's not like they want to see Lady Gaga going totally crazy, but they love it. But a reader wants to have more than just straight line text. So you give
Mhm.
the eye candy throughout the book tastefully. So you said
Mhm.
what you're really just doing is giving an atmosphere and environment to the entire book from cover to cover to the interior, so that you feel like you're inhabiting that story a little bit better.
It will make a difference all the time. All right, what other goodies can you show us, Nick? Anything else that help us visually see what we're doing here?
Well, let's see. I'm going back to like we were talking about the coffee table books.
Yep,
Now, this is a pretty wide book. This is like 13 by 9 inches. That's a
huge.
that's the size that it was a Westminster uh, commissioned me to do the cover of this for their centennial.
Hmm.
But this is a book that couldn't really be done on print on demand.
No,
I think Friesens may have done this, might have done this.
could have been.
But a lot of the books that you see that are large were usually printed overseas. This is a book you may remember from way back,
Oh, yes, for the love of paprika.
and you can see that chili pepper and the title were uh,
Spot coated.
coded
Yep.
as something that print on demand cannot do.
No.
There's also a dust cover with the same effect on it too. But these are, and then of course the benefit you have with a lot of colored books, these end pages can be in color. So
Hmm.
theme of that. Rebecca did the
Hmm.
interior of this book.
Hmm.
So, like I said, coffee table books, gift books have the ability to just be multi-shaped and multi-sizes. Uh, if you've got the funds for it, you know, go for it. You can do a lot of different things. I think the trend so much has been with print on demand. I have no idea what if traditional book printers are as busy as they used to be. I'm thinking they're probably not.
Well, there certainly they're come down with their end runs. With the hot thing right now that we're seeing, and I don't know how they do it. Maybe you can clarify. But you'll see the end pages, and I'd like to talk about back cover copy too, if we can. These end pages now are all in colors and designs on them. How do they do that? Do you know?
The actual end of the book cover right here,
Yeah, the pages that, like, here's the spine. We know how we do his spine, but the actual pages now have a design on them themselves. It's very jazzy.
I think they probably set the art is probably set up just like the art on the spine is.
Yeah.
And they print, it's either, I mean, obviously can't go through the press again because it's collated and printed. So they probably have some sort of a print stamp that they ever actually do that. Or if it's,
Mhm.
or even, I've seen it with the actual page color is like an orange or something,
Mhm.
do that, which is rather interesting.
Mhm.
That's something that only a traditional printer could do, obviously, since it's an
Well,
add-on.
you can, I can see it. It's a bleed. It has to be a bleed. It's like I'm looking at one of my books.
Uh-huh.
The office one. Right. So then I can see, like, oh, here's what we were talking about. Like, you can carry, for example, everyone, we have the beach. I'm a beach rat. Okay. So you have a beach. All right. We have the author's walk. So the interior then opens it up. We picked that up for the opening of a chapter. All right. And what I was just saying is because it bleeds, I can see carving on some of the edges in here. So I've got to find out how they do that system. But I think that there's just so much in design that you can do to carry your themes throughout. So it's yours. And I think that most designers miss the boat, and there's no reason why you have to with that on that. And I'm just trying to look at a couple of my recent books. Now, the other thing we need to say, if your book has color, remember, if you're on the print on demand deal or any printer, if you have one page of color in your book, they just assume there's color on every page.
It's
There's
true.
no there's no discount.
You know,
Sorry about that. Um, that you have. There's also something that I'm going to go back and redo um my copyright pages. The Authors Guild has come out with a new badge saying that this was written by human. This is done with human intelligence. I'm going to start adding that to all my books because I don't use any AI in my writing on that.
it's-
Just I think people will start being sophisticated is discriminating on what kind of books they want to read. Did a human do this, or is this a composition of a gazillion people and then plop, this came out?
yeah, we're in a challenging time right now for with this because everyone is really seduced by how much AI is going to be able to do for them. But in the creative realm, it's disturbing because it's not just publishing, it's music, uh,
Hmm.
and has been for a while actually. But so what is, what's human? What's, what was created organically versus, mechanically or whatever, for want of a better word. So I really think we'll be seeing a lot of that happen. Because I don't want to say I can see where the temptation is if you're on a tight deadline and you want to get something done,
Hmm.
do that. But boy, once you open that door, you're kind of sucked into that always, and I think people will really kind of lose their creative drive if they do that. It's like a drug.
Well, I absolutely believe that. But I guess that's my old snobbery coming through. Right. So Nick, I would, before we go, because we have a few minutes left, I'd love to have you talk about back cover design. I like to see covers. I'm just going to pull a couple of mine here that I can reach out for. So this is historical fiction, everybody. And you know that they're a family, you know. We're just getting ready with the third. But what I like to see, and Nick knows I like to see headlines on back covers. I like to see breaks on back covers on that, or just some variation. And I'm looking at, let me pull. Okay, so here's one, my quote book. So we've got the series up here. We've got a title, like a headline, everybody. And then we've got what this is about in there. And there's several bullets you can see. And then there's another break with a hint to it. I think it's smart to start putting a QR code that leads it to not to Amazon, to your website. Just saying. That would be my opinion.
True. I mean, I'm still flabbergasted about back cover copy coming from authors that you just say, what should I write? They're asking me, the designer, what should
Mhm.
I said, do you have a book? You have books anywhere in your house? Look at the bestsellers now. And I've done the same thing. I've learned from you that, a headline, your back cover copy is marketing.
Mhm.
It's,
Mhm.
it is. So have a headline. If it's not a headline, have a question and you can answer. And then be succinct. You strip it down to bullet points of what am I going to learn when I read this book? Or if it's fiction, what am I going to find out? What are the questions?
Or why should I read it?
Right.
So if you're talking about where Nick is referring to the big bestsellers, often it has just a big blown up size of the author picture. So then what are you going to do? If it's case bound or hardcover, it will have then a dust jacket typically. Well, then that's when you go in and you take a peek. And you can, then usually the back cover will have more of the author bio, but the front part of the dust jacket will give you the synopsis, some kind of a synopsis of the story to pull you in. Sometimes it carries into the second part of that jacket. But this is the pick me up. Okay. This is our pick me up. So, and even with this, I changed the cover of this book the day before I went to print because I wanted an image that said cozy comfortable, because this was comfort foods. So mac and cheese is the classic. And Nick knows me. I use purple and I use green. So I found this image in 5 minutes, and we bought it, and that's the one we used for that. So you can go over there for the cheat, but it's the back cover that you have the lead, and then a little bit you pull out of some sort. I don't know what this says, something about me, and then a little bit more. But notice there's some space in here, and you can read it, versus sometimes you can't read it. And there's many times Nick's come to me and says, okay, I can fit this all in, but it'd be better if you could lose like 6 lines. Okay. So we go back and we lose the lines because this is the market. This is your marketing, where this says, hey, this is a topic, pick me up, but this is what's the sale is going to be back here. And if you could get that around your head with cover back and front, you'll be so ahead of the game. At least that's where I come from as a book coach.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
All right. What are the three big mistakes? We're going to close up here, but what are the three mistakes, Nick, that is typical with book covers? We have like 40 seconds.
Wanting too much on the cover,
Mm-hmm.
not listening to a professional designer,
Mm-hmm.
and less is more.
Less is more. There you have it, everyone. Less is always more, I think. All right. Thank you so much, Nick Zelinger. You can find him at nzgraphics.com. Did I do that right?
Thank you so much, Judith.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
So check out his portfolios up there and see if he might be a fit for you. I bet he might be. All right, everyone, we'll see you next week. We're going to be talking about audiobooks.